All right, well, welcome. I'm Amanda with Make Nevada and Make Alaska, and we are working on going through Northwestern University's free online course for nonprofits. We've already done governance fundamentals, your role, and now we're going to go through the 5 videos for board structure. I'm live streaming on Make Nevada, and then when I update the details description for this video, I will put the link for this video, which will be much more clear than this one, and it won't be backwards. All right, so let's get started. Just check my framing. Okay, I'm okay. Here we go. Board structure. 5 videos. The objective is to learn about keys to effective board staff partnership, clarify the roles of CEO, staff, and board members, understand board committee structure and purpose. When I served on a board, before I was officially on the board, I served on a committee, and it was a fundraising committee, and we met every 2 weeks. It was quite the commitment, but it was really fun, and we would organize these really fun events. All right, first video, stay in your lane, defining roles for board, CEO, and staff. And as always, I like to put the video on 1.25 speed. Here we go. Okay, so the applied thinking. As you watch the video, consider the following. Prior to watching this video, identify 3 to 5 responsibilities of your board. Upon completion of the video, compare your items to the 3 core areas of responsibility noted in the video. Are they the same, different? Reflect on the reasons for the similarities and or differences. So I would say 1 would be fundraising. 2 would be recruitment of either board members or volunteers who have really essential skills such as construction, so they can build animal habitats and pens and fences and gates and water systems. So construction, advertising and marketing, which could fall under social media, and then business, finances, making sure that all of the things that have to be submitted to the government get done on time. Because if you don't do those things on time in a nonprofit, they will make your nonprofit absolved. It'll be null and void. Oh no. Uh, okay, let's see if I came up with things applicable to what they're going to talk about.
Hi, I'm Megan Kashner. I'm on faculty here at Kellogg, and I'm also the director of our social impact and sustainability work. In this segment, we're going to talk about partnerships between boards and staff at a nonprofit. Sometimes I like to call this session something like, Who's the Boss? We're going to talk about how boards of directors and nonprofit leaders can know and stay within their roles. The best relationships between a board of directors and nonprofit leadership come about when everyone knows their role, recognizes one another's expertise and lived experience, and respects one another. When you don't have that, things can go wrong. So let's talk about roles. The board, first of all, is one entity, one. No single board member has any authority. Only the board, when acting as a whole, has true authority. Hold on to that knowledge. Next, the board has 3 areas of responsibility. 3. Take note. First, direction setting, and guardianship. The board is the guardian of the mission of the organization, and through guidelines, the board is responsible for steering the nonprofit in the right direction. Second, the board is responsible for the oversight of the activities of the organization. The board monitors the activities, the health, and the ethical behavior of the organization. Third, resources. The board is responsible for ensuring that the organization is well equipped to fulfill its mission with adequate finances, capable staff, and an esteemed reputation. Notice that the strongest verb here in all three of these responsibilities on the board side is this verb ensures. The board has the responsibility to ensure that the nonprofit has adequate resources to fulfill its mission and do its work. Next, let's talk about the nonprofit's chief executive. That's the CEO or the executive director. The chief executive is also responsible for three things. Get ready for something else worth noting. Number one, the chief executive is responsible for maintaining regular contact with the board, particularly the chair. Number two, keeping the board informed about the issues and activities crucial to the organization. And number three, the chief executive is responsible for the leadership and operation, hold on to that word operation, of the organization. This includes the management of programs and the supervision of staff. Okay, let's dive into that word operation. In order to operate, the nonprofit, including its board and leadership, needs to have clarity on who reports to whom and who's accountable to whom. So there are two core things that you need to understand here. Number one, the chief executive reports to the board. The chief executive is generally the only member of the leadership team at your nonprofit who reports and is accountable directly to the board. The staff report to the chief executive. So number one, the CEO reports to the board. Number two, the staff report to the CEO or the chief executive. Period. Done. That doesn't mean that other leaders don't have contact with the board, but in terms of a reporting and accountability relationships, we need to keep those lines clear. Now, in the beginning of a nonprofit's
I'll pause and say the only staff member usually who's ever going to be going to the regular board meetings is the CEO or executive director. The other staff don't go.
existence, it's common for board members to wear different hats and function in different ways, sometimes even in sort of a staff capacity. When you're building something new, things are always a little muddier. But when the board hires its first CEO or executive director, that's when that board delegates the daily management to that person. Before we close this out, I want to mention a few things about power. Despite the clear responsibilities for the board and for the CEO that I laid out at the beginning of this segment, power dynamics will still rear their heads. It could be a real or perceived power imbalance between the board chair and the CEO. It could be a failure of respect for staff on the part of leadership. It could be dynamics relating to gender, race, or identity that add a complex undercurrent. Even the most clean and clear division of responsibility and defined communication plans can't overcome everything, but it can help. Establishing and keeping to agreed norms on reporting, communication, and who's responsible for the organization's operational decisions can go a long way towards establishing a tenor of respect. The chief executive, as we've learned, reports to the board, and the staff report to the chief executive. The chief executive is responsible for the leadership and operation of the organization. Well, now you know everything you need to know about boards and their relationship to nonprofit leaders, right? Of course not. This is a thing we learn by doing, and we make mistakes, and we keep doing. We keep leading, we keep interacting, we keep fixing and iterating over and over. When it's done right, the relationship between the board and the nonprofit leadership can bear amazing fruit, growth, success for your nonprofit and the communities you serve.
All right, that was useful information. Going back to board structure so that we can move on to the second of 5 videos. Working well together, the board CEO partnership. Understand how to make the important board CEO partnership work well and explore the best practices and behaviors that will lead to a more productive partnership. So if you're new to trying to understand nonprofits, you have the board, they oversee big picture. They are not there on a day-to-day basis doing day-to-day things. And then you have the CEO or executive director who is running the day-to-day operation and is in the nitty-gritty and sees how this thing broke and that person, stole something or whatever. And yeah, it definitely leads to interesting dynamics, to say the least. Applied thinking. As you watch the video, consider the following. Several key pieces of advice were shared for both the CEO and staff. Which of these resonated with you the most? Have you experienced a time when the board CEO partnership wasn't strong? How could that situation have been improved or worked out differently? Yep, I served on a board for 5 years. I was an executive director for 2 years. Um, yeah, yeah. That's why information like this exists, and that's why it's important to try to educate ourselves so that we can do a good job. Nonprofits are complicated, they are different than regular businesses. I would say that definitely a lot more passion and emotions are involved with nonprofits because you're usually dealing with at need populations such as animals. Animals bring up a lot of emotions for people. A lot. Here we go.
I am Gregory White, President and CEO of Learn Charter Schools, a network of 12 pre-K through 8 charter schools in 4 different cities. I plan to spend the next few minutes talking about the important partnership between the board of directors and the CEO. I want to address 2 big questions. 1, how do you make this partnership work? And 2, what are the essential practices and behaviors that lead to a productive relationship?
Communication.
I have a unique perspective. I've served on 11 boards of directors, both for-profit and not-for-profits. In 2 organizations, I served as board chair, where I supervised the CEO. I've served as CEO of Learn for almost 17 years. People often ask, how and why have you stayed at Learn this long? I've been fortunate. I'm very talented and collegial board members, and we work well together. I've learned so much from them about how to be a great board member and a strong CEO. What are the secrets to all great partnerships?
I want to add to that. Birds of a feather flock together. Board culture, relationships, communication, all that jazz, that all is so important.
It doesn't matter if it's a marriage, employment, or business venture. There's several key attributes to make a partnership work. First and foremost, there's a need for a clear delineation of roles, responsibilities, and authority. In other words, stay in your lane. Number 2, there must be an alignment of values. And values are how you make decisions and how you treat people. Number 3, a partnership requires empathy to understand the needs, perspectives, and pressures of the other person. Number 4, and probably the most important attribute, there must be mutual respect and trust. And now I want to share advice to the CEO. Number 1, you are an employee of the board. You must follow their direction. Number 2, never forget, the board has ultimate authority and responsibility for the organization. The board will give you autonomy to operate and does trust you, but never forget, they have a legal, fiduciary, and other obligations to multiple stakeholders. If something goes wrong, it's the board that gets sued and publicly embarrassed. Number 3, earn and keep the board's trust. Give them no reason not to trust you. Trust is very difficult to regain if you lose it. And if you lose the board's trust, you will lose your autonomy. And the best way to maintain trust, do not surprise your board. When you have pertinent information, tell them immediately. It's tempting to withhold bad news and try to fix it. Don't do that. Let them know right away. And you can work together to solve the problem. Always be completely transparent. Tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Number 4, when there's a board vote, try and reach a unanimous decision. Don't win the vote and lose the relationship. As a CEO, please resist the temptation to push it through because you have the votes. And Learn, 99.9% of our votes are unanimous. We don't steamroll people. You may have 8 of the 10 votes in favor. Listen to the 2 dissenters. Assume they deeply care about the organization. Majority does not mean it's the right decision. At Learn, we always ask, What do the two dissenters see? What are we missing? What are they worried about? How can we listen and mitigate that risk? How do we address their legitimate concerns? Number five, as CEO, make it easy for directors to serve on the board. Never forget they are volunteers with many other obligations. Use their time wisely. Prepare for and run an effective board meeting by setting a clear agenda, send the materials well in advance so they have time to review and prepare. And number six, lead a productive meeting. Focus on the strategic and not operational issues. And always allow time for thoughtful discussion, dissent, and decisions. In this final section, I want to share what board members should understand about their partnership with the CEO. Number one, remember, you have hired your CEO. This was the best person you could find. Allow them to run the organization. Your board role is strategic, fiduciary, and accountability, not operational. In plain terms, you own the restaurant, but you are not the chef. Stay out of the kitchen. Number two, respect the CEO. This is their life's work. This is their full-time job. This is their career and livelihood. Remember, this is probably the most informed person in the organization. And don't forget, sometimes the CEO just wants to talk through an issue. Please do not feel the need to solve every problem. The next issue, please do not be work to manage. Respond to emails and meeting invitations. Even more important, please get along with the staff. If there's a problem, please inform the CEO, allow that person to intervene and help. Never forget, the CEO supervises the staff. Equally important, please be collegial and get along with each other. CEOs are not qualified to referee a board dispute. Two more issues. One, have no other agenda than what's best for the organization. Conflicts of interest creates problems. Please do not make me hire your family or friends, your lawyer or your company. Since I report to you, it's hard to say no, even when I know it's in the best interest of the organization. Another good practice is public praise, private reprimand, meaning work out the differences with the CEO before the meeting. If you disagree with the CEO or they made a mistake, please don't berate or undermine the CEO's authority at a board meeting. Have a private conversation and be respectful. I hope these insights are helpful, and I wish for all of you a productive and effective partnership.
That was excellent advice. I'm going to watch that again on my own. That was awesome. My own little. So, one thing, keeping in contact with your board can be super simple. You could have a group WhatsApp or Signal. And I don't know how Signal works, but in WhatsApp, you can tell when they got the message, you can tell when they read it. So just in case, let's say you're, out in the boonies on a, 8-acre property managing animals, and you're having reception issues, you can tell it successfully got to them. And, they can just do a simple thumbs up, right? That's a really easy way. Group text, group emails to keep them in the loop. Then here's one. I learned this early on in my career. Don't write a long email or a long text. Nobody wants to read that. You need to distill it down so that people can look at something and digest it and understand it like super duper fast. Another one is don't should all over me. I had a great mentor teach me that. So when we're trying to manage people, don't should all over them. And then when he was talking about don't reprimand people in the meeting, I had another mentor who told me that, when you're about to go on stage or you're about to start the shift dealing with customers or start the board meeting dealing with people, don't do all of that right beforehand. That's called blowing their mind, not in a good way, but in a bad way. And now everybody's rattled. There's a time and a place so that we can go on stage or start our shift or start our meeting in a positive place. Going back to board structure so that we can do the third of 5 videos regarding nonprofit board structure. All right. Learn about keys to effective board staff partnership. Clarify the roles of CEO, staff, and board members. Understand board committee structure and purpose. Oop, did I do this one already? Oh, yeah. Okay. Nonprofit board committees, structure and responsibilities. Explore the purpose of committees in advancing the mission of a nonprofit organization. The most common types of committees for nonprofit boards and the role that committee chairs play. The first way I served on a board was in a committee for fundraising. It was really fun. It was essentially like event planning, like party planning. Applied thinking. As you watch the video, consider the following. What type of committee might you be interested in joining and why? What tangible skill sets can you bring to the committee that can help to advance the mission of the organization?
Hi, I'm Michelle Rogers, Clinical Assistant Professor in Nonprofit Executive Education at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. Let's explore nonprofit board committees. Why do most nonprofit boards believe that committees are beneficial to their operation? What role do committee chairs play? And what are the most common committees for nonprofit boards? A committee's primary function is to contribute to the effective operation of the general board by providing insight and advice on a specific subject. This requires a clear, well-defined objective, metrics, a capable chair, and dedicated committee members. Committee purpose is similar for all entities and entities of all sizes. All seek to advance the organization's mission by stewarding resources for sustainability and continuous improvement. For example, the U.S. Senate Committee recommends legislation to repair bridges. A college with a $2 billion endowment recommends a new campus wellness facility. And a youth organization with a budget of $150,000 recommends a camp for students to practice their leadership skills. Committees can provide great benefits. They engage board members in the delivery of services, can represent various opinions, support building relationships in smaller groups, and provide a training ground for emerging leaders to refine their skills. So which functions and how many committees should there be? Well, the function of committees and the roles do vary by size and need. There are two basic types of committees. Standing committees are permanent and serve organizational and operational procedures or permanent programs. Ad hoc committees and task forces are temporary and address a specific purpose for a specific time. Events such as hiring a new executive director or making a change in the board's bylaws. Smaller and strong unified boards may not need committees. These board members manage the workload together or delegate tasks to individual members. This requires effective leadership plus trust and commitment from all board members. These tend to be the small working boards or self-funded nonprofits that provide limited activities, such as the Family Foundation that sends urban teens to a working ranch in Montana for a week. Typically, a committee's role is advisory. Remember, the group was created to help the board make well-informed decisions, so communicating key information is critical. Committees usually recommend actions to the board, but the board is not obligated to follow those recommendations. To provide good counsel for board operations and decision-making, the committee must begin with its purpose and a dedicated chair. The success of a committee is often directly linked to the effectiveness of the committee chair, who is responsible for the group's orientation, a work plan supporting the organization's strategy, meeting agenda and materials, recommendations to the board, and evaluating results, similar to the board chair's role. Committees often work with staff members that align with their responsibilities. For smaller organizations, staff may not be available. In this case, identify one or two committee members who have familiarity with the function to provide their expertise. Staff working with committees can answer questions, offer suggestions, and raise operational issues. Committee members consider this information as they focus on strategic needs and goals. Who should be in this crucial chair role? A strong communicator who works well with others, takes initiative, has some content knowledge, and works toward the organization's goals is a good candidate. The chair should foster a welcoming, inclusive culture to get everyone to share their points of view. And the chair should note members' ROIT. Our revered former Kellogg professor Wally Scott taught us that return on invested time is a critical factor for many board members. They must clearly understand what the committee position requires, the duties, meeting times, and the work. People tend to depart if they feel their time is wasted or not appreciated. In any case, an effective committee requires a chairperson who is a great manager and a member to document the group's activity. The minutes serve as an important record, planning tool, and guide for future committees. So how many people should be on the committees? The size of committees is often dependent on the size of the board. The IRS requires a minimum of 3 board members: president, secretary, and treasurer. Some larger or working boards have 16 to 20 members or more. The right number for the board? It depends. Ideally, the entire board is comprised of interested, engaged members, providing support and feedback on issues and ideas. But I must admit, only one of the dozen boards I've joined have had fewer than 22 members. Committee size, like board size, can vary. Smaller committees of 3 to 8 are good for administrative functions such as governance or nominations, while larger committees may be a good option when more diverse views and work is required, such as for a conference or special event. A great way for smaller boards to have committees without increasing the board size is to invite non-board members who possess the desired experience, skills, or contacts to serve on the committees. These members have less responsibility than board members, so recruiting may be easier. This adds talent and other perspectives to the board while cultivating new board prospects. A win-win for all. Finally, what are the typical committees for nonprofit boards? Each committee must have a mission and a charter with defined responsibilities. Standing committees typically cover finance, marketing, communications, nominating, and audit for larger organizations. They help monitor progress, plan, and report to the general board on their specific subject areas. Executive or steering committee members include the board chair, secretary, treasurer, vice chair, and key committee chairs. The board hires and evaluates the CEO or executive director, and the management team supports the executive committee in planning, setting agendas, and determining major goals. Committees must have clearly defined responsibilities to limit confusion and undesired overlap. Executive committees approve the organization's budget and represent the full board as needed. The Finance Committee is a very important committee and needs to communicate effectively with the staff and the board. This committee supports the board's fiduciary oversight and planning by taking on longer-term financial projects like investments, audit, lines of credit, and reserves. You should ensure that you have a board member or two with financial expertise who can help the board provide the checks and balances they should have and ensure financial stability. Governance and nominating committees are often combined under governance. Recruiting new board members, orientation, and board development can be done along with reviewing bylaws, assessing the executive director, and board evaluations. Worth considering if you have a smaller organization or board. In larger organizations, communications and public relations committees provide internal communication, newsletters, official statements, and manage social and general media. Smaller organizations should designate 1 or 2 individuals to serve in these very important roles. A planned media presence is typically best. The audit committee provides checks and balances to help the organization avoid ethical and risk issues. This committee reviews the organization's finances annually and ensures the board can address regulatory and legal questions as well. Ad hoc work committees are only needed for part of the year or to support specific events, such as fundraisers or other one-time programs. And nonprofit organizations with development staff are supported by the fundraising committee through donor appreciation activities, campaign support, corporate sponsorship, and other activities. In small organizations and with working boards, the fundraising committee manages these activities and runs annual campaigns and events. In sum, a well-run committee provides great value for most organizations, and effective board leadership determines the effectiveness of your board committees. Thank you.
That was another one that I'm going to have to rewatch. All right, going back to board structure. And we are on now the 4th of 5 videos. We're almost done. Oh, here we go. What is the executive committee and what do they do? Learn about the purpose and role of the executive committee or the leadership of the board of directors and the different positions that typically comprise the executive committee. Applied thinking. As you watch the video, consider the following. As you consider joining a nonprofit board of directors, or if you are currently serving as a director, what executive committee roles are of interest and what skills can you bring to these roles?
Hi, I'm Michelle Rogers, and I am the Clinical Assistant Professor at the Center for Nonprofit Management. Many boards struggle with the key roles and responsibilities of its members, especially those in leadership roles. Who are the nonprofit board leaders, and what do they do? The nonprofit board is tasked with governance. It sets strategic direction in support of the mission. It oversees operations, approves the annual budget, and sets strategic goals. The staff team makes tactical decisions and manages operations that help the organization achieve these goals. This is much like any team, and the same team rules apply. The leadership team would be akin to the starting five in basketball, with the chair as captain. You start with talented people who have a passion for the organization and a commitment to give of their talents, and don't worry, I'll stop the sports analogy right here. The chair leads the board, and the chief executive or executive director leads the staff. They must perform their jobs well, and they must support, consult, and complement each other. In fact, the chair and the ED should work together to develop board agendas that make your meetings more productive, collaborative, and engaging. The chair is the primary spokesperson for the board, and this person sets the tone by personality, style, and engagement. The vice chair, sometimes called chair-elect, steps in when the current chair is not available to perform their duties, and usually are designated as the next board chair. This solves a key succession issue as the person is selected and trained prior to taking on the full responsibilities. The board secretary's information management role is among the most critical and is often woefully misunderstood. The secretary is responsible for official communications with board members, recording meetings and minutes, record keeping, and board policies such as the bylaws. These duties protect the organization from legal liability and provide insight from past activities and information for future growth. The nonprofit treasurer is responsible for the financial health of the organization and provides reports, information, and counsel that aid strategic planning by the board and top management. Typically, the treasurer chairs the finance committee and makes sure the organization's mission aligns with the operational budget and plans resources for future use. This requires responsibility for the nonprofit's financial obligations, overseeing funding, statements of financial position, managing cash flow, annual reports, overseeing all the financial activities of the organization. The treasurer presents the budgets to the board for authorization and approval. Financial information is very important for decision making, so please be sure that all board members are trained well enough to understand and consider financial issues. Development and communications board positions are more common in nonprofit organizations with larger budgets and/or staff. Next, I want to quickly tee up a few leadership positions that smaller nonprofits may not utilize, although someone is performing governance and development work. Governance is a critical board function, and it's likely that the committee chair would be one of the key leaders. This team's responsibilities include the bylaws as well as the recruitment, selection, orientation, and evaluation of board members. A development chair will partner with the development director to oversee the organization's fundraising efforts and manages relationships with the organization's potential donors. The development chair's duties include interacting with donors to encourage ongoing contributions and seeking out opportunities for financial support through grants, corporations, and sponsorships. These board leaders, chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, are key members of the smaller executive committee, 3 to 7 board members. This team represents the board's responsibilities and can move more quickly, but should not usurp the general board's decision-making role. A final note in closing, remember that leadership succession is most critical for any organization, and the board should have systems in place that allow ongoing succession planning. Your organization will develop the best candidates for key leadership roles, which will elevate the achievement of your mission and the board experience.
All right, we are on, I think, the last one, the last video of 5. Yeah, last one, and then we're done with this one. Woohoo! Board structure. Here we go. Last one. Community-based boards, balancing strategic oversight and doing the work. Learn about board member responsibilities and engagement for community-based boards. In this video, Evelyn Co. Fitzgerald, CEO of SVP Chicago, blah, blah, blah. Oh, you know what? We have already listened to this one. Yes. We listened to this one in a previous thing, and if I am correct, it's like 23 minutes long. No, 16. Okay, this is a different one then. It's different. New info.
Hi, I'm Liz Howard, the Executive Director of the Center for Nonprofit Management at the Kellogg School at Northwestern University. And I am delighted to be with my friend Evelyn Co. Fitzgerald, the Executive Director of Social Venture Partners Chicago. Today we're going to talk a little bit about board member responsibilities and specifically board member engagement in community-based boards. Ed, would you tell us a little bit about SVP Chicago and the work that you do to give us a context for our conversation?
Absolutely. At SVP, we are trying to change the way we do philanthropy in Chicago by supporting community based organizations that come recommended to us for making outsized impact in their neighborhoods. And we support them with some philanthropic dollars, but most importantly, with time and talent and connections to kind of help these organizations increase their impact in their neighborhoods and bring philanthropists into the equation to make a difference in communities.
Thank you. And I know in our previous video that we did with your former board chair, Cindy Palaskis, we had a great conversation about board responsibilities and community-based boards. So I would encourage everyone to go watch that video. But today, I really want to talk about a concept you and I have shared a little bit that I think is just really unique. As we think about boards in the nonprofit sector, we all know that boards are established to govern. That's their job. But sometimes, in community-based boards particularly, they are actually acting as advisors to their executive directors or CEOs. Can you talk a little bit about that distinction between governing and advising?
Absolutely. As you point out, all board members for nonprofits are have the same general duties. The duties of right care, of loyalty, right, of obedience. But some executive directors in community-based organizations need more from their boards. They need advice from their boards. These EDs need a safe space to think, a thought partner as they think about kind of where they're taking their organizations, where the opportunities are, and board members are uniquely situated to provide that kind of perspective. The key, though, to making that advice really stick and make it relevant is that there needs to be trust built between the executive director and the board leadership. Without that trust, then I think the advice is less likely to be relevant, less likely to be followed. But I think that by building that trust and that true understanding about the needs of the organization, that advice is very much appreciated.
And one of the great analogies that you shared is the concept of steering versus rowing,
Yeah.
and how board members, I think you said, are always steering,
Right.
but sometimes they need to row too.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that steering versus rowing, or steering and rowing in a community-based board?
Yeah, we see that in community. We see the need for it in community-based boards, but we also see the need for it in our own board at SVP. Community-based organizations are, just by definition, under-resourced. They tend to fall under the radar of traditional philanthropy, and so they're under-resourced both in terms of dollars, but also in terms of kind of non-monetary resources. And so these EDs, for example, are the ones that are developing their budget, but also picking up sandwiches for their programs, right? Sure. And there is often for these community-based organizations an executive director and then program staff, and they don't have kind of a leadership management team in between. And that is, as anyone that has run an organization or has worked in an organization knows, there's a great need for that senior level of leadership to really move an organization's goals forward. And so in a case like this, where community-based organizations can't afford to hire that level of leadership, board members can step into that role and can play that role of not only of the governance role, but that senior leadership role for the organization. So it's just important, I think, for board members to understand when they're doing what, right? When they're steering and when they're rowing. But the rowing is very much appreciated by these under-resourced organizations.
Yet, so let me push back on that a
Yeah.
little bit. Yet, we don't want, or the executive director or the CEO doesn't want the board members micromanaging their activities. So,
Right.
as the CEO or the ED, how do you create that boundary and say, okay, I appreciate the help growing, but now I need you to go back and steer?
The key is the board chair in this particular case. It's the board chair's role to both kind of set goals for the board, their board and their board members, but also to make sure that those goals are being met in the most efficient way. And so that culture is important to that, establishing the right board culture where everyone knows their lane and is respectful of when they're invited into row. Will openly and gladly do that, but will not put their own needs before the organizations and get sensitive when the board chair and the executive director feel that enough rowing has been done. And so it's all about being clear about the goals and establishing that board culture where steering and rowing are both common, but there are limitations to both, and so that there's open conversation about when it's welcome and when it's not.
And to that point, you've mentioned trust,
Yeah.
and that trust relationship. How do you see board chairs foster that trust with you? You've had several board chairs over your time
Yeah.
as executive director. How have they forged that trust with you so that when you invite them into row, they come,
Right.
but when you say, we got it, they go back to steering?
Right. I think it almost begins before the board chair's in the seat. So a nominating committee for the board really has to think hard about who is the right board chair for the moment that we're in, right? And also consider the chemistry between the board chair and the executive director, because that is a real thing. My best board chairs have been great at relationship building with me, like starting out relationship building with me. The best board chairs that we've seen with community leaders do the same thing with their executive directors. It is about spending time together. It's about having open conversations about what are the board chair's goals for the year, for example. What are the executive director's goals? It's open conversation about like communication styles, setting aside regular time in the board chair's schedule to have to talk about all things organization building, and that flows through to board meetings. Like setting the tone and the culture of the board meetings is all about kind of being coordinated in advance of the meeting about what the board chair and the executive director are trying to accomplish in the meeting, and then making sure that the board chair is steering and facilitating the conversation in a way that the discussion that needs to happen is happening.
Great. Sometimes you're going to get board members who love rowing.
Yeah.
And really want to row all the time.
Yeah.
Whose responsibility is it to ease them back into the steering, or to have that hard conversation about, no, the organization's got it at this point?
Ultimately, it's the board chair's responsibility to manage their directors, right, to manage their board. With that said, there has to be a culture fostered where the executive director feels comfortable having a conversation with the board chair on the side, right, about over rowing or even under rowing, right? I mean, it goes both ways, right? But that conversation needs to happen between the executive director and the board chair, and then the board chair is the one that needs to make sure that board members are meeting the goals of the board and are contributing in the way that makes the most sense. It's important that there's that coordination between the executive director and the board chair, but I think ultimately it's the board chair that has ultimate responsibility for that.
Well, and I think that peer relationship, that an executive director is never going to have a peer relationship with even the best board members, and so having the board chair take that responsibility, I think, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
At what point, maybe organizationally, in a growth manner, at what point do you think boards really stop growing and just steer?
Yeah. I'll answer the opposite question.
Okay.
because I don't follow rules. When nonprofits are at an inflection point, that is when they're most likely to need growing. With that said, as nonprofits grow their cash reserves, right? It's not necessarily their revenue, because that might go to a program, but have more dollars to put towards staff. That tends to be the time when less rowing by the board is needed, because they have the staff resources to take on some of that rowing. With all of that said, I don't believe that there is that graduating from rowing is necessarily a sign of, oh, now we're a mature organization. There are SVP. I helped to found SVP 12 and a half years ago, and I would consider us still to have a board that rows as well as steers. And it's not. I don't, at least in the immediate future, I don't see a need to push our board to solely be a steering board. And it's not for lack of kind of board maturity. And so I think it all depends on where the board in the organization wants to put its resources, and it is not necessarily a sign of a goal to always move toward a solely steering board.
Well, and I think board members bring skill sets
Absolutely.
to the board, and in many cases, people join a board because they want a little bit of rowing along with the steering.
For people that join community-based boards in particular, it's often one of the main reasons why they join a community-based board versus kind of a board of a more established, larger organization. It's that opportunity to roll up their sleeves and get more involved in a hands-on way with operations, with kind of that senior leadership. It allows them to flex different skills, right, and to grow different skills for maybe for that will benefit them in their day jobs, and it allows them to make a more tangible impact that they are less likely to kind of see or to have the opportunity to do in a much larger with a much larger organization with a much larger board.
Right. What piece of advice would you give to one of our audience members, perhaps, who is thinking about joining a community-based board? What one thing should they think about as they're considering joining that board?
I have so many things. I would say that it is about finding an organization for which they have true passion, and wanting to really making sure that organization helps them meet like their own social impact goals. Joining a community-based board is one that requires people to kind of think openly and be flexible and agile. And if that if that's the kind of work that people want to do, they're all volunteers, right? They're great. If that's what they want to do with their volunteer time, I strongly encourage people to look at community-based boards. These are the people that are on the ground, that are proximate to the issues that they are tackling, and have a true understanding of what the needs are in their communities. And it is a fantastic way for people that want to make an impact in under-resourced communities, for them to make that impact without doing what you and I have done, right? Without going full-time into the nonprofit world. So I highly encourage people to look at those community-based organizations if that is where their passion is.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate your energy and your enthusiasm and your insights for those who are interested in community-based boards and understanding that community-based boards may be different than other kinds of boards. So a big thank you to M.A.K.E Fitzgerald for being with us, and a big thank you to all of you who are watching. We are delighted that you have chosen to participate in the Nonprofit Board Essentials series. We are thrilled with our partnership between Kellogg and the Allstate Foundation. Thank you all very much.
All right. So like she said, this is Northwestern University's free online course for nonprofits. And when I update the description for these videos, I will put the link in there so that you can watch it yourself. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful day. Bye.